I'm delighted to welcome today Stacey O'Callaghan, who is a Thrive specialist. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me, Elaine. Excited to be here.
And when you say thrive, it's thrive as opposed to survive, and there's a huge difference, isn't there, between those two? Can you give us a bit of background as to why you've chosen that specialism, thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mission, my motto, my passion is taking people and businesses from surviving to thriving. Now, the reason I'm so passionate about that is because I've seen the detrimental impact surviving has on people, but also on businesses. So when you're surviving as a person, you feel quite detached, disillusioned, discontent, dissatisfied. You're kind of just going day by day by day, reacting to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. You're not really living with intention. You're just getting on with what's in front of you. Very often when we're in that state, we're not necessarily looking after ourselves. So we're lacking in our self-care, which means our sleep might be impacted, our diet might be impacted. We might not have time to exercise because we spend our whole time doing our shoulds, doing what we should be doing, what we feel like we have to do. And so we create this life based on other people's expectations, based on what other people think we should be doing. So shoulds for me are like pests. They're things or people that suck up our time. And before we know it, days, weeks, months, years have gone by and we're surviving. We're not miserable on a daily basis, but we're not particularly happy. And that has a detrimental impact on mental health and on physical health. And then flip that on its head and look at surviving in businesses. Surviving people in businesses aren't performing as well as they could be performing. They're not as engaged in the business. They're not as passionate as to why the business is doing the things that they're doing. They're disengaged. And that obviously then impacts the business. It impacts the performance. It impacts well-being. It impacts morale. It increases staff turnover. And it reduces loyalty and customer satisfaction and things like that. So it has a detrimental impact, not only to the individual, but also to the business, which is why I'm so passionate about helping people thrive.
How did you get interested in this topic, Stacey?
Yeah, so 14 years ago, I did psychology at university. In fact, it was a bit longer than that now. And through that process, I started to volunteer and help other people. So I worked in an advice centre and I helped people with their problems. So anybody could come into the advice centre and it would be my job to help them find a solution to their problem. So I had things like bankruptcy or support with benefits or support with relationships, or somebody was kicked out of home and needed support with where to stay and things like that. And through that journey and through my psychology degree, I realised that I wanted to help people. That's what I wanted to do in my career. So I left university, moved down to London and started work in that industry. And I was essentially assessing people to understand what their needs were. So understanding where they currently were, where they wanted to go to, and what kind of support they needed to get from A to B. And I started to study psychology and study counselling. So I became a cognitive behaviour therapist. And in that process, I created a 6-week condition management course, which was all about helping people manage their condition better, but actually step beyond their condition, step beyond their label, supporting and empowering people to understand that just because they have depression or anxiety or pain doesn't mean they can't be whatever they want to be or do whatever they want to do. And it was about helping people and empowering people to take action and own their condition, better manage their condition, so that they could go on to live a better version of the life that they currently had. And in that process, that's where I kind of found the whole surviving to thriving thing, because as a therapist, what I felt like I was doing was helping people survive, helping people keep their head above water. And what I really, truly wanted to do was help people become the best possible version of themselves. So that's where the surviving to thriving piece really kind of kicked in for me. Yeah, so that's where passion has come from.
Brilliant. And you ooze passion and you light up when you're talking about it, which is fabulous. You talked about owning the condition. In your experience, do you find that sometimes when people own something, I find in the work that I do supporting people with cancer, for example, the language that people use can be helpful, but it could also be detrimental. So when you own something, at one level it's acknowledging it, but at another level it's kind of keeping it, and it's like you don't want to go forward because you've got this thing that you're hiding behind, some label or whatever. How does that translate in through your work?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I definitely can relate to the label piece and how being labeled with something can hold you back. I worked with a lot of people who would hide behind their condition, the label, simply because the system, the social care system that they were in, allowed them to do that, gave them permission, almost encouraged them to do that without giving them the support and the empowerment and the confidence to actually manage their condition. So for me, when I say own the condition, I mean two things. First of all, acknowledge it. You have to accept that it exists, first of all. And second of all, own your part of it. So take responsibility for managing the condition. And I totally appreciate that some conditions you can't do anything about. But there are conditions, for example, chronic pain or depression or anxiety, where you can take responsibility for managing that condition. You can seek the support that you need from professionals to help you with that. But you can also do a lot of self-help techniques to help you move forwards with that. So, for example, I have chronic pain in the neck, back and shoulders, and I have had chronic pain for over 20 years. And I've spent my life learning how to manage my condition. And I was diagnosed with that condition quite early on in my early 20s. And it took me a good few years to even accept that that was a thing for me, that I would have to manage this thing sort of going forwards. So my personal journey of accepting my condition and then learning to manage my condition and owning the condition in the way that I've described has really helped me and influenced how I then support other people who have long-term health conditions. Because not only can I relate to their struggles and what they're going through, I've also studied a lot in this area for my own benefit, for my own practice, so I can give people support in that area too.
You can't take away personal experience, can you? And as you say, it helps you to empathise and understand, and be supportive. Does your situation have a name? The condition that you referred to?
Yeah, I mean, the name that I was given, the diagnosis that I was given, was chronic pain in my neck, back and shoulders. It was from a gymnastic injury when I was young.
Okay, I had similar. I've got a twisted and curved spine and a bit of spina bifida. I used to have chronic pain, but I have a device that I use every day that I have no pain whatsoever now, none at all. So maybe we can talk separately about that afterwards.
Yeah.
But yes, it's interesting that because a condition, chronic pain isn't a condition; it's a symptom of an underlying problem. So the medical profession do talk a load of nonsense at times, and I do despair with that. And a lot of people believe the language. I used to man a helpline for people newly diagnosed with cancer, and I would spend literally hours scraping people off the ceiling or picking them off the floor, depending upon how they've been dealt with by the medical people and the language that's been used. So our self-talk, the language that you use to ourselves is really important. So you mentioned people with depression, anxiety, and so on, that are all debilitating conditions. How you say people can kind of take ownership and manage. What tips would you give for people with those kind of conditions on how they can help themselves?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is always to get professional support. So the first port of call is always to go to your GP, talk to your GP about what's happening, and get professional support. That might be medication, or it might be a referral to psychological services, or it might be both. But then, whilst you're waiting for that kind of support, you can start to take steps to help you move forwards. So, for example, if you're suffering from depression, it's super, super important that you start to create a routine for yourself. You make sure that you get up at the same time, you go to bed at the same time, and you give yourself that opportunity for self-care. So you make sure that you're eating, you make sure that you're trying to sleep, you make sure that you're showering every day, you're taking care of yourself. And then you can start to document things like your triggers. What are you feeling throughout the day? So keeping a thought diary, for example, can be quite helpful, especially if you've been referred to psychological services, because one of the first things the therapist will say to you when you go into your first CBT session is, how are you feeling? What does your routine look like? And what thoughts are triggering the feelings that you're experiencing? So you can start to take ownership of the recovery process, of the healing process. And as for anxiety, one of the first things you'll be asked to do in a therapy session, for example, is to write down your anxious thoughts. So if you're feeling anxious, what was the trigger? What happened when you felt anxious? What was the consequence of the trigger? And how did you overcome that? Or did you overcome that? How long did it last? On a scale of 1 to 10, how extreme was it? Because again, what you're starting to do is to develop your self-awareness around your condition, understand the condition a little bit better. When does it occur? How does it occur? What's the impact? What's the trigger? Because the more you're aware and the more you understand your condition, the more you can then start to manage it and move forwards with it.
Which sounds, for people who don't have a condition to deal with, it sounds perfectly logical, common sense approach to take. But when people are in that kind of continual negative funk, it's hard for them to do any of the things that you've described. So getting help sounds the obvious thing to do, but very often in my experience is the last thing people want to admit to, that they've got some kind of problem. So it's a difficult thing, and there's no kind of one big answer, is there, at the end of the day? How does this translate into the workplace? So I know you work with people and employers to help. So how does your services work in the with the employer model?
Yeah, so in the workplace, I essentially help businesses create a thriving work environment. So I would run an assessment with the business to understand what's really going on for them. So what their goals are, what their strategic objectives are, and what their challenges are right now. And then sort of create a coaching package that will then help them overcome any obstacles in order to get to their strategic goals. Now, very often that means working with teams and leaders. So newly established teams, newly established leaders, helping and supporting them to fit in with the business culture. So for me, business culture is super, super important. And if there's a misalignment between the people in the business and the business culture, it can impact performance, but it can also significantly impact the mental health of the people within the organisation. So it can increase things like the risk of burnout. Just that sense of not fitting in can have a massive impact on performance, morale, confidence when you're in the workplace. So I work with people on a one-to-one and group basis, helping them achieve their definition of thriving. Very often it involves starting with, what does your team identity look like? What's the definition of success? What's the why? What's the big purpose of the business? What's going on for the business? But also then, okay, so how do the team and the individuals fit into that? What are their roles and responsibilities? And I love to create that psychological safety, that sense of trust, that sense of community within a team, within a business. Because once you have those things, you'll start to feel more fulfilled, more satisfied. Any misalignments can be sort of ironed out, and I help individuals do that with their values. So, for example, if your personal values don't match your business values, there will be a misalignment. You will struggle to do the things you want to do in the workplace, or you'll be able to do them, but you'll feel very dissatisfied about doing them. So if you want to create a thriving workplace, you need to have thriving people. And a big part of that is creating a workplace that people actually want to go to, that people enjoy, and jobs and roles that people feel empowered to do, so that they can come to it feeling engaged on a daily basis.
Brilliant. Very well expressed. And the misalignment is huge. It's everywhere you look, isn't it? The roles and responsibilities for a particular position in an organisation, very often the words and the deeds don't match up. I find this a lot when people ask me to do a behavioural profile exercise with a team. The work that the individuals are doing and the people that they are, there's a huge misalignment. So, for example, people are doing work that requires an extrovert personality type, but they're introverts, and of course you've got a misalignment there. You've got misalignments with the values and the beliefs, the values, you know, the attitudes, the whole bit. And I've walked from several projects because of huge misalignments that are just too big, you know, just too on the too difficult pile. And if people aren't prepared at the senior leadership level to make changes, then it's very difficult for the rest of the team, and we start getting bullying situations, you know, this one's getting at that one, and then arguments, and the whole thing just goes wrong. Luckily, most of my projects have been, you know, really well received over the years, but I don't work in that field any longer. So it's lovely that you're so young, if I might say, Stacey, and able to grasp this, because a lot of what you've been talking about is what I would have expected to hear from somebody older. So you seem to be an old head on a wise, you know, what did it say? Wise head on a young shoulders, which is really refreshing. So I take my hat off to you. Well done.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I've got 14 years experience. I am in my mid-30s. I may look like I'm in my 20s, but I'm in my mid-30s. And I think for me, my study has been invaluable, but the most important thing for me is getting that experience in the workplace. I've worked with people and I've worked with businesses. After I finished my therapy kind of work, I did that for about 7 years. I moved into corporate for 5 years, and I became part of the leadership team in a corporate governance organisation. And we were part of a very large change initiative takeover, essentially. And that just gave me so much experience in terms of change strategy, understanding leadership, being part of a leadership team, you know, championing process improvement and all that kind of stuff. And so I was a strategic business analyst. So I worked with a number of organisations and businesses, helping them achieve their business goals. And for me, it just gave me a fantastic understanding of what toxic looks like in the workplace, and also what the impact of that is, both as a leader, as a team member, as a wider organisation, the impact on customer satisfaction, etc., things like that. Yeah, so I feel like my experience really has been really vast, but really, really beneficial. And I always sort of said to myself, I have to be a certain age to be able to start my business, or I have to be, you know, have a certain number of years, or I have to have a certain number of qualifications. But actually, the opportunity arose 2.5 years ago for me to just take the leap and do it now. And I sort of never looked back, you know, it was my dream. I sort of worked for 9 years to make the business happen by doing all the qualifications, getting all the certifications, getting all the experience. So to be able to sit here now and be living that is pretty amazing, to be honest.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Years ago, I'm in my mid-60s now. Years ago, I did a master's degree. I left school at 16 with not very much of anything, and I graduated when I was 40, between 37 years old and 40, with an MBA. And I did it I call it my Up Yours MBA. I did it to prove that actually all the experience that I had in those previous, you know, 20 something years of working were valuable. And I was accepted on the course because of my experience, not because I didn't have any. I didn't even have an A level, and I went straight into a master's. So technically I shouldn't have even been on the course. But the professor said it's the experience that he was really after, and I ended up giving 2 lectures to all my peers who were lawyers and barristers. So the experience is invaluable. So well done for you. And having your goal as well. That's really, so you had your goal way before you actually started, so you worked towards that.
Yeah, it gave me a direction in my career, because a lot of people, they ask me sort of, why did you jump from assessing people to assessing business strategy? That's quite an interesting change, but that was part of my plan. It was part of my design. By the time I got to a point where I was ready to leave therapy, because I help people thrive instead of just survive, I knew that I also wanted to do that in the workplace. But for me, I needed, you know, first-hand experience. I needed to be part of a leadership team. I needed to be part of a change initiative. I needed to walk the walk and talk the talk. Do you know what I mean? I needed to know what it's like, both as a leader but as an individual within a team. Because for me, if you don't know those two things, you can't truly empathise with the people that you then go on to work with. So it was important for me to get all that under my belt before I then stepped into the business. But it was definitely always sort of in the back of my head, I need to be doing these things, getting these experiences, touching up on all of these qualifications, because I have lots of different certifications. I'm also trained in DISC, for example, along the way, so that when I was ready to do my business, I felt really ready to just go for it and do all the work that I want to do. Because for me, the reason that I'm so passionate about surviving instead of thriving is because it gives me an opportunity to truly make a difference to people's lives, but also to help businesses help their people too. So the impact can be much wider because I'm working with businesses as well as individuals. So I needed that kind of time just to get to a place where I felt ready to do that.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And at the end of the day, businesses are made up of people. So, you know, I used to have on the back of my business cards years ago, people, process, profits. You have the right people in the right place doing the right thing. They would determine the process, and then in turn profits will come. It's not rocket science, is it?
You would think it is, though, wouldn't you?
Well, hey ho. So how can people get hold of you, Stacey?
So I'm on social media. You can follow me on LinkedIn if you look up my name, so Stacey O'Callaghan. I'm also on Instagram at SJS Coaching Services. And if you take a look at my website, you'll find lots of free resources. So I have an SJS Coaching Services Hub, which is full of personal development tools, which can help you as a leader or as an individual or as a team member start your journey from surviving to thriving. So that's available if you subscribe to my newsletter. I also have a How to Thrive guide, which again is available on my website, and that will help you start your journey. So it will help you understand what thriving means to you, and it will help you take the first steps on your journey from surviving to thriving. So my website is www.sjscoachingservices.com, and you can check out all those resources on there.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for your time today, Stacey.
Thanks so much for having me, Elaine. It's been a ball. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Marvellous. Wonderful. I'll go on your site and get your, I've had a poke about on your site, but I'll go and get some resources, and I'll pop them in my Perfect Health hub as well, so that and people can contact you through that. So I've got a hub which is a membership, monthly membership thing. There's all health resources on there that people can help themselves if they don't want to have me as a mentor, or they're not ready or whatever. They can, there's DIY health resources on there, and that's also, you know, for helping people to do the same thing, you know, thrive instead of surviving. And there's going to be financial health in there as well as career and you know, all kinds of things. So marvellous, marvellous. On a Tuesday morning, I tune in to something called Leaders Live. It's 9:45 till 10:45. A guy that runs it is called Andrew Jenkins. I'll introduce you because I think you'd be a great speaker for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has people on there who he calls it a chat. So it's quite an interesting thing. So it's live on all the social media things. So they're not seen on it. So but we can comment, you know, in the chats and all the rest of it. So I'll introduce you to Andrew. As I say, I think you'll be a good speaker for him.
Fabulous, thank you. Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that. I love just spreading the word. So any way that I can help, I'm absolutely willing.
Brilliant. I forgot to ask, where are you based?
Based in Woking in Surrey. Right.
Okay. So you're pretty central to lots of people. Well, I guess most of your work's virtually now, is it?
Yeah. So I tend to do one-to-ones, face-to-face, and then group sessions. I go into clients. So I was in London yesterday delivering some face-to-face team coaching. I prefer doing the team coaching stuff face-to-face if I can.
Yes. Yeah, I used to do that because you get the reaction and the interaction, don't you?
Yeah.
You said you're qualified in DISC, trained in DISC. So what software do you use?
So I don't use software to do it. I don't currently practice DISC assessments with my clients. My DISC qualification was part of my personal performance diploma in coaching. So I am certified to do it, but I don't use any software to do assessments at the moment with my clients.
Okay, if you want to do that, I've got my own tool. So
I've
had my own tool developed, and I link it with health as well, so I can tell by looking at somebody's profile the likelihood of them being ill, what the misalignments are between their internal style and their work style, and so on. And that's so I use it in my health mentoring.
I'm really interested actually, because I understand the misalignment between a personality type and and a role and a career. Totally get that. But I am really interested to hear more about how you can predict or understand the kind of health conditions someone would have based on their DISC profile. That's really interesting. I've not come across that before.
No, it's unique. I've invented it. And it's over. I've been doing it for 25 years, DISC in corporates and teams and so on. But it's in the last 10, 13 years so I've had four different versions of cancer, including stage 4 in 2015, and I beat it in 3 months. So that's why I've ended
incredible.
I've ended up in the health arena because I've got all this experience. I'm a qualified nutritionist these days, and I was a chief executive in a law firm, and I ran one of Ernst & Young's consulting divisions with over 200 staff in London. So I've had my own businesses all my life, except 12 years in the middle where things went wrong. So I've done, whatever, from being chief exec to cleaning toilets and everything in between, over my period, 40 plus years, 45 years. And also I cured a kidney disease I was born with and told I'd be on medication for life. And I beat that 20 something years ago. So I've got a lot of experience on the health side of things, and I've discovered patterns. So when I was manning the health, the helpline for the cancer, I was seeing patterns of behaviour, and I thought, well, with all the experience I've got with DISC, there must be a way that I can help people. And I tried all kinds of things, looking at health through the 4 different styles of DISC, and then looking at the cancer side of things, the types of cancer, all sorts of ways I've looked at it, and it just nothing was working. And then it dawned on me, it's not just the behaviour style, it's also the environment. So I've identified 10 areas in life that people need to get in balance, in addition to their profile, in addition to their career. So it's a whole jigsaw puzzle. But what I've developed now is my own tool. You're very welcome to use it, so that you can see the modern version. And if you want to use that with clients, then you're welcome. We'll have a conversation about it. But I teach people DISC as well, so if you want a refresher on it, that's something we can talk about. Marvellous.
Yeah, I'd love to see like the tool and the breakdown of the areas and stuff. I'd be really interested in that if you wouldn't mind sharing that with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll drop you an email with links and so on.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have a look at it.
Okay, all right. Take care. Have a fabulous day.
You too, Elaine. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.